Today we're going to take an existing Ruby on Rails application and convert it so that it can be developed and deployed using Docker. Up to this point, we've been using mostly Hello World applications when we've been using Docker outside of our Python series where we're just using a Python image in order to run our code. But today we're going to take some non-trivial code, an application that actually exists already, and we're going to convert it from being a non-Dockerized application to working inside of Docker with all the services that it needs. The application that we're going to be working with is called Happy Hours, or it's a happyhours.io. And this is an open source Rails application, and the entire application is packaged up, so it's something that we can actually work with that is pretty substantial. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come over here and we're going to copy this and clone this to our repository. So let's git clone, we'll paste that in. Now if we cd into the hours directory and just take a look at what's here, we'll just open it up and add them. Just skimming down the side here, we can see that there are quite a few different services that it uses. Being an open source application, it can use a lot of services for free. So we have Hound for doing some style checking. That's not going to affect us. It uses Travis. It has a sample env file, which means it probably uses .env. It's an app.json and a proc file, which would indicate that it's using Foreman and probably Heroku. So if we take a look at this proc file, you can see that there are going to be two processes running. We're going to have web and worker. So that's not too bad. This jobs work. This will be their background jobs, and it uses Unicorn as its app server. And then if we go over to this app.json and read this a little bit, you can see that there are some environment variables that we're definitely going to need. So that'll work out for us. The last thing we want to check out before we get too far is let's look at the gem file and see what we have to install. We're going to need quite a few different things here. We're going to be using Postgres, so we'll create a database image or a database container using the Postgres image that we've used before. And then this coffee Rails means we're going to need a JavaScript runtime, so we'll install Node. Keep on going here. We've got Dolly, which means we're going to be using memcache, so we're going to have a cache container, which we haven't come up to this point. And then in their testing, you can see that they're using Capybara WebKit, which means we're going to have to install a few extra things in here too, namely Qt, so that we can run our tests in the browser without having to launch an actual browser. Now that we've seen the lay of the land of this application, let's first start out by creating our DockerCompose.yaml file to sort of sketch out what we want our services to be, and then we'll build on top of that to have our custom Docker image for our application afterwards. So we'll say new file. This is just docker-compose.yml. And this is going to be kind of similar in a way to what we've done before using volumes. We're going to call it DB data. And this is going to be on the same machine while we're in development. So it's not external. And we're going to have services also. So we're going to have a cache service, and this is going to use an image. And we know that it uses memcached. So we're going to say memcached, and then I happen to know that we want 1.4-Alpine. And the reason we want Alpine here is the image tag is Alpine is a really small Linux distro, so it just means that this image is going to be really small. Ideally, that's kind of what you want. Uses up fewer, or uses up less of your storage on your server that way. Next up, we're going to have our DB, which has a few environment variables. It's going to have Postgres user and Postgres password. And then we're also going to use an image for this. We're going to use Postgres 9.5. And then we'll map that volume. So DB data is going to go to USR, local, PG, SQL, data. Oops, data. Okay. Next up, we're going to have a jobs container, and this is going to run our background jobs, and we'll run it in a separate process. That way we don't have to block. I'm going to assume that their background jobs don't, they actually run in a separate process, but I haven't really looked at the code yet. But we're going to have an env file, and this is going to be .env, which could potentially cause us some issues with the fact that this application uses .env, the Ruby tool, but we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to build based on the current Docker file, and then we're going to map through our volumes, just mapping our local directory into USR src app. In this one, we're going to actually give a separate command. So we're going to say bundle exec rake jobs work, which if you remember looking at the proc file, this is the exact command that they were using there. And this depends on the database. All right, then we're going to have an app also, and this is going to be pretty similar. So we're actually just going to copy this, paste it down here, change a few things. So it's going to be app. This is all the same. We can get rid of this command. But the difference here is going to be that we're going to do some port mapping. So we'll have ports, and we're going to map from 8080 to 8080. So we'll be able to access this at localhost 8080. And jobs and app need to have the exact same code, so they're going to use the same Docker file. But we'll package in the normal unicorn starting command inside of our Docker files, and then that's why we don't have to specify a command for app. All right, we'll save this, and then we'll come over and we'll create a new file for our Docker file. So Dockerfile. And this is almost identical to some of the previous Ruby ones we've done. So we'll say from Ruby 2.3, 2.3.1 actually, and then we need to run apt-get update, and then we always say yes, and then we make it quiet just so it doesn't have to spit out as much. We also want to run apt-get install, also quiet and yes. We're going to do no install recommends, just so we can install as few things as possible. This might leave us open to running into problems if there's something that was recommended, we didn't install it, but we actually needed it. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. We're going to install the PostgreSQL client. We also need Node.js. We need Qt5 default, and this is for Capybara WebKit. And we also need libqt, whoops, if I could spell, Qt5 WebKit 5-dev. A little bit of a mouthful, but this is just the development library that we're going to need in order to integrate with Capybara WebKit. And then from there, we're going to apt-get clean. And finally, rmrf var lib apt lists, just to clean up all the extras. We're going to set our working directory to usr src app, just so we don't have to cd every time we use our container. We're going to copy over our gem file related stuff into the our working directory. We'll run bundle install. And then lastly, we'll copy over the rest of our application. And our final thing here is going to be to set our command, which is going to be bundle exec unicorn-c, so we can pass a config file. And that's going to be in our config directory as unicorn.rb. So if we save that, hopefully I didn't fly through that too fast, but we need to more or less install all of our dependencies here. Since Ruby installs quite a few of those things, we just need Postgres for a database, Node for our JavaScript runtime, and then Qt for some of our testing libraries. And then the rest of this is the same basic approach that we've taken every time we want to load a Rails application into a Docker image. Alrighty. If we move over in config, there's probably going to be some different things in here just because I know about Heroku, and that is that, yeah, so it doesn't come with the database.yaml by default. It has one for Travis, and then it also has one for as an example file here. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to take one of these. We'll probably take this one, and we'll duplicate this, and then we'll just make this the normal database.yaml. And since we're going to configure this with environment variables, it's not going to be a big deal. So we're going to have the database. This will be default, not development. There we go. We'll get rid of this database line. And we have our adapter. We also need a host that we're going to pull from an environment variable. Postgres host. And then we'll do a similar thing for username. This will be username. But this will be Postgres_user. And that's just because it's what's required from the Postgres image. So we're gonna follow suit here. We'll copy this again and do the password. If I can select that, there we go, password. Line this back up. Save it. Okay, so test is going to use this. We want development to do its own thing too. Development. It's going to look very much the same. Inherits from default. And sets the database to hours development. There we go. And that should be good to go, but just for safe measure, in case we ever did want to deploy this to a production setting, we can do the same thing here. So we can do production, set this to default, and the database to hours production. All right, save that. Looking over in the sidebar here, there is no secrets.yaml, which is also something that we're going to need. So we might as well create that while we're at it. So add a new file. This is secrets with an S YAML. And this takes a few things. So it's set up very much the same way as our other one, but it's going to have a secret keybase for every section here. So copy these. We'll have test, and then we'll also do one for production too. And for these, just so it's easier for us and we don't have to package up any kind of secrets, we're actually going to use an environment variable for this too. So this will just be secret keybase. And now that I think about it, I should have just copy pasted this for each of these. There we go. So we'll save that off. Does that look different? There. Okay, that's gotten us pretty close to what we need. But the next thing we're going to have is this env file. So we know that they need environment variables, and we've added some ourselves. So we are going to copy the sample env file into a normal env file, which isn't going to be tracked in the repository. It's just going to be for our sake. And then we'll add the extras that we need. So if we come down here to the sample.env and we duplicate it, just duplicate it as .env. And I'm going to get rid of this. The rack environment's not really necessary for us to set here. It has all these extra settings. And then the ones that we added are going to be Postgres user, which we're just going to set as hours, Postgres password, super secure, and then we'll also set a Postgres host up here, which is going to be DB, and that's so that it can route within from container to container. DB will make sense to our application container. We'll also set a secret keybase in here, unless there already is one. It's just really short, so that's fine. For development's sake, we don't need to do this. If we were to deploy this to production, we'd be in big trouble. But right now, I'm not super worried about that. All right, let's save this. Okay, I think I have everything that I need. So we'll bounce back over to our terminal and we'll just build some things. So we can spin up our DB in cache right away because these are based on images. I've already downloaded the images to this machine so that I don't have to waste as much time. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to build our app and jobs containers. And we can build those at the same time because they're going to be based on the same Docker file. So jobs will be built near instantly because the layers were cached when building app. So we'll DockerCompose build app and jobs. This is going to take a while, so I'm going to stop while it's doing this and we'll bounce back when it's done. Now that our images have finished building successfully, we can go ahead and we can prep our database so that it can run with our application. So we'll run DockerCompose run --rm so it removes the container, app, rake, db create, and db migrate. Now our database is up to speed. I did forget one extra thing in the environment variable file. So if we bounce back over here and take a look at our env file, there's a single tenant option here. And we're going to set this to true. And that's because we're going to run this as though we want to do time tracking for ourselves, not necessarily that we want to have the whole sales portion of it with the home page and different plans and stuff. This is a flag that allows you to toggle those two individual features. So if we come back over to our terminal, we actually have one more thing that we want to run, and that is DockerCompose run --rm app rake. And then they have a custom rake task called create user, which is going to set up our single tenant. So we'll use coder, last name Journey, Keith at CoderJourney.com, and then my password. You won't see it. It's very secure, I'm sure. All right, everything is created. So let's spin up our application in our jobs containers. So we'll do DockerCompose upd app and jobs. If we look at our processes, it looks like they're all in the up state, so we should be okay there. Oops. And now we'll go over to our browser and we'll try to reload this. So we're going to go to localhost 8080. It's taking its sweet time. So that kind of makes me wonder if we crashed. So Docker PS. No, looks like we're still up. Oh, hey, there we go. It worked. So we know my email here is Keith at CoderJourney.com. My password. All right. Signs us in. Gives us a lot of messages because we're missing some of the extra things here. So we have no projects, we have no categories. So we're just going to click through and see what we can do here. So we're going to have a development category. And there's a design category. And that worked out great. So now if we go back to our projects, see that we don't have any projects. So we'll create one. Let's build a course. I don't know that we need a description or a budget. All right, there we go. So we were able to convert this entire application to run inside of Docker without needing to install any of the dependencies on our machine. If we go back over here, there was one thing. We did all those extra things related to tests. So if we Docker compose exec app bash, this will take us into our running app container, and we just want to try to run our tests. Since this is using Travis, I'm going to assume that rake is how you run these tests. Looks like it's running factory specs right now. Okay, it looks like we did get a failed test, and this is because it's seeing a sign-in email password when it's expecting to see something else. So that tells me that odds are that single tenant flag switch we did caused a problem. And if we look at env right now, you can see that these are really set as environment variables. So Postgres password is actually in here. The way .env works is it doesn't actually load them into the env or the environment for your shell. It loads them into the env object inside of Ruby. But it will not overwrite those things. So since we set them explicitly in the shell, .env won't override them. So that means we're going to have to make a change to the spec helper in order to get these things to work. So if we go into spec helper, and we come in here before we load the actual application environment, we can require .env, the tool, and then we will tell it to overload. And we want to point it at the sample.env file. And the reason I know to do this is because I've already looked at the travis.yaml file, and you'll see that they do a cp sample env to env, and this is what sets the environment that they want to use running tests. So we will do that same thing in our spec helper always, and that would actually allow that Travis YAML file thing to be removed because it would be handled right here. But so if we save this, it'll get loaded back over. And then if we run rake again, we'll make sure that this test suite runs. And if this runs, that means we successfully, without breaking the application, converted it to run in a different sort of environment. Success. The entire test suite ran, and even the Brakeman report ran, which is the last step. So we have gone from taking an application that we didn't even write to converting it to running inside of Docker with all of the test suite running too. So that was a pretty big ordeal, but it's something that doesn't require that many steps, and you just need to know sort of what you're looking for in the application. A lot of it involves making sure the application can work off of environment variables. So keep that in mind when you go to convert your own application to run inside of Docker. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're going to have some more Docker-related content coming up in the future, but leave me a comment down below. Tell me what you thought about this, if the pacing was bad, or if there was something else that you would have liked me to show you. I want to know what you want to see. That way I can make you some high-quality content. But if you'd be so kind to like the video and give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and share this with your friends, I'd really appreciate it. The exposure really helps.